Jordan and Lebanon hold talks on expanding economic ties and the impact of the Syrian crisis on the two countries.
Also, Syria's warring parties declare a 48-hour ceasefire in two frontline areas that are mediated by Turkey and Iran.
And Croatia says it cannot confirm the death of a Croatian hostage who is reported to be beheaded by Daesh terror group in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10.
Hello and welcome.
Jordan and Lebanon explored prospects for forging closer economic cooperation and also discussed the fallout of the Syrian crisis on both countries, which host a large number of Syrian refugees. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour and his Lebanese counterpart, Tamam Salam, led ministers at a meeting of the joint Higher Jordanian-Lebanese Committee. Mansour told ministers holding the 7th meeting of the Joint Committee, Jordan advocates a political solution to the Syrian crisis, noting that Amman and Beirut maintain common positions towards the Syrian refugee issue. He said the two countries saw eye to eye on the need to find a political solution to the Syrian conflict. The Lebanese Prime Minister said the committee met at a time the region is witnessing grave circumstances that ravage regional states and threaten their unity. These developments, he said, had put Jordan and Lebanon before two major challenges: the influx of Syrian refugees that has strained their resources and the confrontation with terrorist organizations. Countering these groups, he said, should be through the political moderation approach and eradication of poverty and ignorance that are a breeding ground for extremism and terrorism. The two sides signed a number of memorandums of understanding and executive programs to enhance cooperation in different fields, including youth, media, energy, social development, tourism, public administration, trade, and industry.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, refugees UNRWA, plans to close 700 schools in the region due to a shortage of funds. Lower House Speaker Atif Tarawne and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Affairs Nasser Judah discussed the impact of the UN agency's decision on Jordan. The meeting, attended by 35 lawmakers, was called by the head of the Parliamentary Palestine Committee, Yahya Saud, to discuss UNRWA's financial crisis aimed fears the agency could end its educational services. Tarawne noted the negative consequences of the UN agency's financial crisis on the living conditions of Palestinian refugees. He said Jordan will call on donor countries to provide more funding to UNRWA to continue its humanitarian services. Judah reviewed Jordan's follow-up on the crisis, citing memos passed to 49 foreign ministers, urging them to offer further funding to the UN agency's budget. The foreign minister also discussed UNRWA's deficit with the agency's Commissioner General Pereira Krahenbull, noting the funding shortage would negatively impact education services offered to Palestinian refugees in the region.
Border guards thwarted an infiltration attempt by 3 non-Arab nationals as they tried to cross the frontier into a neighboring country last night. A Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army spokesman said the infiltrators were apprehended and referred to the concerned authorities. The spokesman vowed the armed forces will deal firmly with any infiltration or any attempt to undermine the kingdom's security and stability.
Syria's warring parties declared a 48-hour ceasefire in two frontline areas after unprecedented mediation from Turkey and Iran. The ceasefire halted fighting between insurgents on the one hand and the Syrian army and its Lebanese militant Hezbollah allies on the other, in the rebel-held town of Zabadani and in 2 villages in Idlib province. Sources said the truce could be extended to give time for ongoing negotiations aimed at evacuating civilians and combatants. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif met with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and discussed solving the ongoing crisis in the country. Zarif said it was time for the neighbors and other parties to play a role in fighting extremism. Hours before his arrival, rebels bombarded the capital with rockets and the government launched airstrikes on nearby rebel positions. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 13 people were killed and 20 wounded by the rebel rockets and 31 killed in the government airstrikes. The two Idlib villages of Al-Fua and Kafraya have been targeted in a parallel offensive by an insurgent alliance that includes both the Ahrar al-Sham and the Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front.
Croatia said it could not confirm the death of a Croatian hostage who was reported to be beheaded by Sinai province, the Egyptian offshoot of Daesh terror group. Prime Minister Zoran Milanovic told reporters that Croatian authorities were trying to confirm the authenticity of a photo being circulated on Twitter by accounts supportive of Daesh. A spokesman at the Egyptian Interior Ministry's press office said he was checking the report and added that he would inform the media through a statement.
Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi visited the Habaniya air base to check on the fight against Daesh militants in the western Anbar province. He also toured the nearby town of Khalidiyya near Ramadi, where he met local people. Shiite fighters of the Hashd Shabab volunteers have joined the Iraqi army in the fight against Daesh. Nevertheless, the wide-open territory is still a challenge for Iraqi security forces despite a U.S. program to train local Sunni tribal fighters. In Baghdad, Iraq's parliament voted unanimously for the biggest shake-up in its governing system since the U.S. military occupation. The changes eliminated entire layers of government and gave Abadi new powers. The Prime Minister has sought to transform a system which critics said encouraged corruption and incompetence. As part of his push to cut government jobs, Abadi dismissed his cabinet secretary and his aides.
A suspected U.S. drone strike killed 5 Al-Qaeda fighters in eastern Yemen as Islamist militant groups claimed a string of attacks in the war-torn country. Officials said the bombs hit the men in their cars while traveling east of the Arabian seaport of Mukalla, which was occupied by Al-Qaeda fighters in April after security forces retreated. As Yemen plunged deeper into conflict, the country now finds itself in the midst of a major food crisis. Hilal Elver, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right for Food, warned this morning that over 12.9 million people in Yemen are now surviving without adequate access to basic food supplies and facing malnutrition and possible starvation. Israeli occupation forces arrested 15 Palestinians during night raids in about half a dozen towns in the West Bank. The Palestinian Interior Ministry said Israeli troops staged search and arrest raids in the cities of Hebron, Nablus, Beit Lahem, Jenin, and Qalqilia, and rounded up the Palestinians who are suspected of activism against the occupation. Last night's raids were the latest in almost daily sweeps in which dozens of Palestinians were detained. Warring factions in Libya ended 2 days of UN-sponsored talks in Geneva with a pledge to end the political crisis and military conflict in the country within weeks. A statement issued after 2 days of talks by the UN support mission in Libya said the parties underscored their determination to conclude the dialogue process as soon as possible, with a target date within the coming 3 weeks. United Nations Special Envoy to Libya, Bernardino Leon, called on the country's warring parties to agree on a national unity government by the end of August and endorse it with a vote in September.
We are proposing the parties to work on the coming 3 weeks and to try to have agreement on these important 2 points on the annexes and the unity government by the end of August. What Libya is facing now is deeper chaos and division of the country. So I hope all the Libyan actors will be wise to avoid this scenario, to expedite the talks and to reach an agreement very soon.
Back here at home, Her Majesty Queen Rania visited Tasmimi's co-working place and met with its founder and CEO as well as a group of young entrepreneurs. Her Majesty was briefed about the aim of the website and elaborated on how the website's primary focus is to be able to create job opportunities for the maximum number of talented Arab youth possible. The Queen also met with a group of young entrepreneurs who are currently incubated at Tasmimi's co-working place, in addition to those who have left and currently operating on their own. Last year, Tasmimi won the Golden Prize for the Best Online Services at the Jordan App and Web Awards, as well as the first prize at the ArabNet Awards for Best Startup in 2010. Tasmimi is now working to provide online educational courses in Arabic to help develop the skills and talent of the designers to increase their chances of finding the most suitable jobs.
In business news, China's devaluation of the yuan for the second consecutive day has triggered record low prices of metal in the European market. Today in London, nickel, copper and aluminum all dropped to 6-year lows as fears intensified that the weaker yuan could corrode demand. This report has more.
China's yuan sinks for a second day, and that's making European markets jittery. The country's central bank has once again cut the currency's guiding rate, though it says this isn't the start of a sustained appreciation. Shares in major exporters to the Asian economy are plummeting as their goods become even more expensive for Chinese consumers and on fears of less demand in the future. Automaker Daimler is down some 3%, and so is luxury giant LVMH. London nickel, copper and aluminium dropped to 6-year lows. Glencore fell 5% in morning trade, while BHP and Rio Tinto fell around 3%. The yuan devaluation is also raising the spectre of a currency war, but IG's Chris Beecham says China could argue otherwise.
The PBOC might argue that we have been in one for quite a while, with the Fed having pushed the dollar down over the past 5 years thanks to rounds of QE, now the ECB doing the same thing. So China, yes, it's getting the blame for this perhaps most blatant move, but it is maybe a currency war has been underway for quite some time.
Against the backdrop of struggling global growth, a race to weaken national currencies could put further dampeners on recovery efforts.
You could see a sort of reining back of investment and expenditure by firms, and you get this negative feedback loop that could do quite a bit of damage, I think, to a global economy that still isn't at full health.
China acknowledges that yuan depreciation will help stimulate exports. The question is, at what cost to its trading partners?
Don't eat anything foolish, don't eat too much, and marry person you love, was the advice of Bulgarians Peter and Paulus Langarok, the world's oldest living twin brothers, gave to live a long and healthy life. Born in 1913, the brothers have lived together for most of their lives and until this day barely leave each other's side and share a room at their nursing home. For Peter, the happiest memory of a long life spanning most of the 20th century and the 2 world wars was the day to find out both he and his brother had been appointed magistrates. While they are the world's oldest living twin brothers, they have another 3 years to go to break the record of US brothers Glenn and Dale Moyer, both of whom reach 105.
And finally to the weather outlook, pleasant in most regions for the rest of tonight with northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, normal summer conditions are forecast for many regions, but it will remain hot in the Jordan Valley, where temperatures will reach the 40-degree marks. Winds will be northwesterly moderate, turning dusty in the afternoon.
The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a hot day tomorrow with a northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow.
To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. Jordan and Lebanon hold talks on expanding economic ties and the impact of the Syrian crisis on the two countries.
Also, Syria's warring parties declare a 48-hour ceasefire in 2 frontline areas that are mediated by Turkey and Iran.
And Croatia says it cannot confirm the death of a Croatian hostage who is reported to be beheaded by Daesh terror group in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair.
And I'm Lower Balkar. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Good night.